Hi, and welcome to our week on colleges and technical vocational education. Today, we have one of our own alumni, Dr. Anne Charles. And Anne Charles works for the School of Interdisciplinary Studies at Conestoga College in Waterloo, Ontario. Wait, is it in Kitchener or Waterloo?
Actually, that's a really interesting question because we are in Waterloo, we are in Kitchener, we are in Cambridge, we are in Stratford, we're downtown Kitchener, we're in Guelph, we're in Milton, and many other places as well.
So
Our
is
our
that
main campus,
multi-campus?
we have so many campuses and not just main campuses, but satellite campuses as well. And it really reflects this stupendous growth that we've had in the college system over, I would say, the last 10 years, particularly.
And how long have you been at Conestoga?
So I started at Conestoga in January of 1996. This was my first semester in the college system, and I came from the UK originally, so I have some background in the UK teaching at the college and the university sector there. And I started at Conestoga, Conestoga faculty, and I should say I'm faculty, not administrative staff, and we have a number of different contract types for faculty. So initially I started as, part-time, moved into partial load. We also have a sessional
Mm-hmm.
contract is different from the university contracts. Sessional reflects full-time hours, but is so you could teach up to six. Well, you could in fact teach more under a sessional contract, so it would be the equivalent of full-time. But I've been full-time at Conestoga. What in the university sector, one would normally start at one of the professor grades, associate or assistant professor, and getting into a tenured position would be akin, we don't use the word tenure, but full-time
Mm-hmm.
means that you're full-time and permanent, non-contract. So I've been full-time permanent at Conestoga for 21 years.
That is a long time. And you,
Mhm.
I believe, are a sociologist and a political scientist. And I know you've done work on policy, work on governance. So tell us what you teach at Conestoga.
Right. Well, I'm attached to the School of Interdisciplinary Studies, and that sort of really reflects my interests as well.
Mm.
If I were to say what sort of hat do I wear, and you're absolutely right. It's the sociology and politics, but it's political sociology rather than family studies, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it really reflects my background, which is and the key interest that I have is the relationship between the state and society. And you can see that through policy frameworks. And that's what got me interested in higher education, because you've got the combination of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of what I teach at Conestoga, I teach predominantly into our degree stream programs. So
Mm-hmm.
degree programs, we have a number of baccalaureate degree programs, and I teach courses which reflect that background.
Mm-hmm.
And so the courses that I'm currently teaching this semester are a political science course. So that's looking at not just the politics, what's happening on a day-to-day level, what I would call sort of, the juicy, gossipy things
Yeah.
about politics,
Yeah.
but looking particularly at political structures. So
Mm-hmm.
constitutional frameworks, how we set out powers and authority, because that's what I'm really, really interested in, and then how that impacts people at an everyday level. So I teach a political science course this semester. I'm also teaching a social problems course. So it's an examining social problems course. That's into our early childhood education degree. Well, it's Bachelor of Early Learning
Mm-hmm.
Development program. A bit of a long-winded description of that program, but these are people that would go into teaching stream and perhaps may even be
Yeah.
OISE students in the future because they
Yeah.
want to work in the school system.
So I have a
And
quick question. Can I
yeah,
ask you a question
sure.
on that? So
Mm,
you've been part of Conestoga for 30 years almost. So
yeah.
what did they actually offer the baccalaureate degrees when you started there?
No, in fact, we the bachelor's degree program, really, or programs, I should say, started as a result of policy change,
Mm-hmm.
and in fact, that reflects my own research. That was one of the things that I wanted to find out is, how did this come about from a politics viewpoint? So, and that's what I research. But there were two pieces of legislative changes. There was the Post-Secondary Education Choice and Excellence Act 2000, and that was followed afterwards with a new college charter, which is the Ontario Colleges of Applied Arts and Technology Act 2002. There's also an Ontario regulation, it's OREG 3403, which relates to that as well. So we had some governance changes that took place as a result of the new college charter, the new College Act. But it was really the Post-Secondary Education Choice and Excellence Act that paved the way for applied degree programs.
Okay.
Now, the colleges had for many years, and certainly I can trace that tenure back, as you quite rightly say, it will be 30 years come the end of December this year that I will have been at Conestoga. But there's always been this sort of concern that perhaps, some of the visions that were set out by Bill Davis going back to the mid-1960s may have actually been maybe not quite so relevant in the 21st century as they were perhaps in the mid 20th century. But this idea of sort of a binary system, and Conestoga over many years had seen some blurring of the binary divide, as had other colleges. But certainly there was a huge impetus from the colleges. Many people have said, well, they saw what was happening, so there's a little bit of policy learning from other jurisdictions. Australia had removed some of their binary divide. Certainly the 1992 universities that from the United Kingdom, the polytechnics were given the ability to become universities, so had university status. So you've got sort of a policy framework that's happening outside. That created a lot of impetus. But essentially, the colleges were hurting and had been hurting for many, many years, particularly on a funding basis. And this really sort of propelled a lot of advocacy. Now, anybody that's interested in the advocacy framework, obviously that's part of my research, and perhaps is a little bit outside of the domain of our conversation today. But certainly it was a push from the colleges wanting some form of equity and some form of recognition of the huge role that they actually play in the education, post-secondary education in the province of Ontario. When we consider, accessibility, that was an issue. But and one of the ways that the colleges had pushed for some of the inequity and the perceptions of perhaps being sort of a second to or not quite as good as the universities. So in other words, to have that recognition was to show that we could also sort of offer degree programs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
One of the things. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, this is so interesting that we actually see the shift in the degrees, and you've linked this back to a system that was set up in the 1960s that just doesn't meet the demands we have in the 21st century. And you also mentioned this incredible growth of places like Conestoga and really Ontario's college system generally. What is it that increased that student enrollment? Is that linked to things like the availability of bachelor's degrees, or what was it that sparked that?
Now, again, you ask such interesting questions because they're really multifaceted in terms of the answers to that. And I think the increase of Conestoga and the remainder of the colleges, so we've got 24 colleges in the Ontario Applied Arts, Colleges of Applied Arts and Technology system. Now we're a system of colleges, but we're all individual colleges. So we're all, if you can imagine, sort of, individual business models, and we've got sort of governance structures at the local level, but we're also got some similarities in terms of mission, and we're covered by one piece of legislation, which is the OCAT Act. But certainly for the growth of colleges, I think the initial contribution or the initial growth in the first part, well, maybe the first 20 years, let's take my 30 years in the college system. For the first 20 years, that initial growth and the growth that preceded my tenure at the colleges was really to do with creating accessible education. So we saw that we had moved from a system which was far more elitist into a mass education system. And I think Martin Troe, describes that massification system, a massification of higher education all around the world, much more eloquently than I can do. But we've moved almost to a universal system. Now, by the time we get to more recent growth, the more recent growth and the development of so many campuses, really we're fueled by internationalization. And if you were to ask me about my student body today, I think it's different for degree level compared to diploma level, because we do see some differences there. It's also different if we compare the trades, because we do have a skilled trades campus, which is predominantly domestic students, a few international. It's still predominantly male, so we still see that gender divide. But in our diploma programs, particularly the shorter duration programs, 2-year programs, we are seeing predominance of international students.
Now, that's so interesting to me.
Contrary to public belief, a lot of people will say, but everybody's doing business. One of our biggest programs, in fact, they every semester, because of the growth of international students, we seem to be putting on more classes, is a general arts and science program. General arts and science 2-year program.
Really? And this is drawing the international students?
This is drawing international students predominantly. Now, some of them do take 1 year and then move into business programs or do other programs around that are offered by the colleges, but a massive growth in general arts and sciences.
And that's where you encounter them, because you're teaching in interdisciplinary studies.
I only take the majority of my teaching is into our degree programs. So I do have one course which is interdisciplinary, but interdisciplinary studies we teach into every single program in the colleges. Now, part of that is to do with our mandate. So for degree level programs, our degrees, initially they called them applied degrees. Now the applied degree, and we could have a conversation about the applied degree part if you wish, but we've dropped the applied degrees. We don't have to use that term applied anymore. And many of our programs are also now at honors degree level, 4-year honors degree.
4 years,
Now, part of the requirement, though, for our degree programs is to have ministerial approval. So we don't have degree granting authority on our own without ministerial approval. We adopted a very similar system to the UK polytechnics in the 1960s, where they had the Council for National Academic Awards. So the degrees went through the CNAA. Our degrees they're not awarded by CNNAA. They are, or our equivalent, which would be the PCAB, Post-Secondary Education Assessment Board. They're not awarded by PCAB, but they are vetted and approved by PCAB, who then make a recommendation to a minister to actually grant ministerial approval. Now, as part of that PCAB and the design of our degree programs, it is mandated that we have 20% of courses that are what is described as disciplined out. And so 80% is in your main. So if you decide that you want to be a mechanical engineer, 80% of your courses will be mechanical engineering or related to mechanical engineering, that applied focus. But 20% of your courses have to be what we call discipline out. And they would include communications courses. There will be some elective courses. One of the courses that I teach to our engineering programs in particular is a science, technology and society course. So it's looking at science and technological development, but looking at its impact and also, the impact. So it's an interplay that takes place between the social and the science technological. So that's one of the courses that I teach into that. But it fits that 20% discipline out component.
So it sounds like they're doing a really interesting balance between the historic approach to having the trades or having a very skill-based approach, and saying we're actually going to broaden this to be what we're calling whole person or liberal arts education, make sure that they get these citizenship building courses. That's amazing. And the students probably have a range of choice in that. Is that electives for them?
Well, it depends. And this is where the complicated bit comes in. And that is, and we'll stick at degree level. So the diploma level courses, they have, so interdisciplinary studies teaches into every diploma level course. And there are general education components, which are set out again in ministers' binding directives.
Okay.
And so there has to be a number of discrete courses. It's between 3 and 5, depending on the length of a diploma program.
Okay.
But hopping back to the degree level component and the course that I teach in terms of science and technology, for example, that course is a mandated one into the engineering degree programs. And that's because not only do we have to seek PCAB approval, but our engineering programs are fully accredited for leading to PEng status. So we have a second review body, which is the Engineering Board, CEB, so Canadian.
And that's unique to Conestoga, if I'm correct. Like they're the only one in Ontario at the college level who is accredited by the engineering college. Is that right? Yeah, that's very impressive. Right. Yeah.
And so our degree programs, so we have, the engineering board, the assessment board, they come in and they check all our programs. And the course that I teach, because it's engineer, and that relates to your question about the science and tech course, for a professional engineer, whether you're a professional engineer doing your engineering degree at U of T, or whether you're doing your engineering degree at Waterloo or Conestoga, there is a requirement for a science and technology and society program. And
that's not coming from the college. They're not making that decision about curriculum. That's coming from the engineering accreditation.
So it's part of what is required for an engineering. So it's that breadth component or the discipline out part. So the engineering students don't get a choice. But if you were taking an accounting degree, for example, or you were taking our criminal community and criminal justice degree, occasionally, not every semester, but occasionally I will teach and I call it short form, I call it STS. I would teach that as an elective, and then they could choose that. And so somebody may take my science and tech, society course. Somebody else may do, medieval literature. So that would be a choice.
And for the students in the shorter cycle 2-year diploma programs, what's the transferability like if they'd like to do a 4-year degree in the end? How guaranteed is that? What sort of requirements are different or the same?
Again, another really interesting question. And again, it sounds like I'm really washy here because it depends. It depends. Now, for one of the courses that I'm teaching at the moment, and I'll use that as an example. So that's teaching into our Bachelor's of Early Learning Program Development program. And we also have a diploma level course, which is a 2-year course, and it's Early Childhood Education, or ECE for short. Now, I teach 3rd year. My course, a social problems course. Again, it's not an elective course. It's discipline out, but it's mandated. It's part of that degree design. And we for that program, because there is a strong alignment between their diploma program and their degree program. In my 3rd year. And so it's a what we call a 7300 level course. 7 denotes degree, 3 is the higher level as opposed to a 71. So I do get students that bridge in from not just our early childhood education diploma, but also I have sometimes students from Mohawk or Niagara who are also taking that degree. So the bridging in that course is very good.
So students can take their 2 years at one of these institutions, and they're almost guaranteed to transfer to Conestoga to be able to finish that as a degree instead of a diploma. Okay.
Absolutely. Now there is again, depending on the requirement of students, and there will be, obviously a marks cutoff. If somebody's doing the 55 shuffle, then there may be some questions that, because 55 is our pass, some questions asked, they might find it more difficult. Now, if you were doing a diploma in general arts and sciences and you wanted to go into the early childhood education degree, there are going to be gaps. And so obviously the transferability would be more difficult there. We have a lot of students that transfer into our Bachelor's of Community and Social Justice program.
Yeah.
and they would come from our police foundations or our protection security investigation stream.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some movement there. Um, and that's great for students because there are pathways. But to move from a 2-year diploma into an engineering program, which is unrelated, it would be very difficult to do, and probably
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be in the student's best interest to do that.
But it sounds like, because then of course switching degrees is switching degree, like switching subjects, disciplines is
Mm.
switching subjects. It's a that's a start at the beginning again situation. But it sounds like there is a strong relationship between many of the diplomas and the 4-year degrees that match their disciplinary area. So students have a lot of pathway mobility. So when they're coming into that, there's options for them to continue education. It's not a closed door. That's really impressive. And I've heard of other partnerships. We hear of Guelph Humber. You and I both live in Guelph.
Mm-hmm.
What about sort of Conestoga's partnerships with universities? What sort of bridging or twinning programs
Mm.
exist?
Okay. Now, I had a student some years ago, and was a great student in my class. And this student decided to, and I think it was Wilfrid Laurier that they were planning to go to, and I think they were doing a business program. So this student took a class that I was teaching, which was an interdisciplinary course. So it was a mixture of sociology, economics, and politics.
Mm-hmm.
And they applied to Wilfrid Laurier and asked for some transfer for credits, and they got one. They got one out
One.
of
And do
2 years.
they have a 4-year degree or a 2-year diploma?
That was it. They were going into a 4-year degree, and
Okay.
at that time, so this is a number of years ago, but they got
Yeah.
one course, and luckily for me, it was my course. So
Yeah.
I can honestly say I've never come across a student that taking one of my courses that hasn't had difficulty getting credit for it. But
Okay.
it's usually on a piece by piece basis.
Yeah.
So they will look to see what is there. Now there is the other side. So often universities are criticized, and students may complain, well, I've got a 2-year business course here, but I can't get enough credit for it. Now again, it's to do with matching, but
Mm-hmm.
the other problem becomes that for many students that do jump to a university, and if they do get sufficient credit, and I'll give you an example of another student that and this was not a student, I know this person very, very well, but so I can certainly attest to the validity of it, but
Mm-hmm.
was given the equivalent of one semester off as a result of college. But in the discipline at the university, it has prerequisites. So if, for example, you've done psychology at the college level, and you've done really well and got great marks, and you move into the university level, but you can't take the 202
Yeah.
until you've done their their 101.
Mm-hmm.
So it means then that they still end up, they get credit and they think, oh, well, I've got half year off, which is wonderful. But they end up doing more than 4 years because they got to take the prereqs again because they can't get into the upper year programs.
Yeah. So the
And
university could say, come into second year, but the courses actually may put them back to first year again to get prerequisites. Yeah.
absolutely. And the other thing is that, the teaching pedagogy may be quite different. So we've got to recognize that. And we do teach differently depending on the level that we are teaching. And so, for example, when I'm teaching a diploma level course, my teaching pedagogy is much more reflective of my student body.
Yeah.
My degree level, I won't say I'm a little bit more hard-assed at degree level, but you expect you're developing sort of more independent thinking, where you might be more sort of coaching, and I don't hesitate to use the word directive at diploma level, but there is a distinct difference.
Give us some examples of maybe an assignment difference, because these students are going to have a week on teaching and learning as well, but it's going to be university focused. So I'd love to hear, give us an example of how you might differentiate a first year course in a diploma program, and compare that with what you might imagine a first year university course would be like, or a first year, or even a 4th year in the baccalaureate at Conestoga.
Okay. Now, I would say more of it is to do with your rubric design.
Okay.
And so we also work on learning outcomes. So we don't curve grades or anything else, but we have learning outcomes. So at the degree level, our learning outcomes are reflective of what I would call sort of, if we use Bloom's taxonomy, for example, you've got the higher cognitive domains. So you've got the analysis, you've got the synthesis and the evaluation. I always have a problem with synthesis because I think actually synthesis is something everybody struggles with. But they do put that, Bloom puts that down as number 5. I think it should be number 4, but that's my bent. Now, when we're designing our programs at the degree level, our outcomes are far more reflective, our learning outcomes are far more reflective of those higher cognitive skills. So consequently, when you're developing a rubric for your assessment, and students will obviously not just use the instructions of the assignment, but they will look at the rubric as well to look at the expectations. But those expectations at the degree level would be far more holistic related to those skills. At the diploma level, and I had when I was teaching in the UK, we always used to say, the difference between the GCSE level was, GCSE was identify and explain. And when you get to the higher cognitive, the university level courses, we went beyond the identify and explain. But at the diploma level, much of it is to do with sort of comprehension and application. So do you understand it? Can you do more than regurgitate it? Can you apply it, and can you reformulate it in a different way? Now, this semester, for example, at my degree level, and this has worked really well with as a piece of assessment for my engineers, but I've been doing academic posters. And so an academic poster, we're all struggling with AI, and we're all struggling with academic integrity with new technologies. But one of the ways that you can get around that is in the design of your assignment. So rather than have somebody write a paper about something, which might be difficult, and I'm not suggesting anybody would cheat on purpose, but we certainly don't want to sacrifice the integrity of our credentials in any way. So at the degree level, my students have got an assignment where they're doing academic posters. So I will design it in particular chunks and say these things have to be be dealt with. So we're looking at engineering and sustainability is the topic of that. So there's far more latitude and expectations to not just do independent research and analysis, but also structure it. So you've got that synthesis, multiple sources, you've got graphing and diagrams and things. At the diploma level, it's much more directive. So you will, these are the sections that I want, these are the expectations. And we will also, before the assignment is tackled, we will go through and we teach people how to do the assignment.
It makes sense.
It's far more directed,
it's all scaffolded.
Far more independent at the degree level than it is at the diploma level.
And what I love about that, with this is an introductory master's course that we're doing this video for. And of course, when my students, I don't just write 3 sentences, but I could, right? Please pick a topic of your choice and write 4,000 to 5,000 words, formal essay, use APA, double spaced. And that's, people seem more concerned about it being double spaced than they do, with what the content is. But that's very different than a detailed rubric with all the pieces outlined. And, we are also very concerned about AI and trying to restructure some of our assignments to say, how can we make sure that students are doing the original thought, interrogating these sources that they're coming across, because we want them to be experts on brokering knowledge, right? On be able to say what is authentically the knowledge that should be in this paper. So I love hearing how you've sorted out the different learning expectations for students at different levels of the degree. And it sounds like once they've got those 2 years in the diploma program, they then have built towards being able to take those upper level courses that have more original critical thinking, more synthesis, and things like that.
Yes, many will, but there are also, we've got to recognize that we have mixed ability at our diploma level, and we're probably only, I don't think it's even 10% at the top that would move into a degree program.
So the transfer is quite small for the people coming into a diploma program. That 2 years is their goal, and that's going to be the accomplishment for about 90%. Right. Okay, that's helpful to know.
Yeah, and particularly for international students, what international students are doing, they're paying big fees. We recognize what's in the press, but they struggle. They're happy. I have a lot of students that are very happy with 55, and that will get them towards that the post graduation work permit, and that's their goal. Whereas I have the international students that I would have in the degree level courses are very different in terms of focus, and are looking for not just an opportunity to set up life here, but also are looking for a credential that is leading to some sort of professional status. So we do see some differences, and we got to differentiate. It's not necessarily all down to just ability, but it's also to do there's practicalities
and professional goals and dreams, right? Your own aspirations. And that's what I also try to tell students is we set up systems at universities and colleges that we want students to move through, but we also want students to take some agency and to use our institutions for what they need, to be part of that, help us to understand what are they needing right now? How can we match that? I do have a sort of a bit of a wrap-up question for us. And it's really related to innovation, because you've talked about this huge growth in the college sector. You've talked about the internationalization. You've talked about having different types of degrees at different lengths. It's really quite incredible what the colleges have been able to do in terms of market responsiveness. And I guess I'm wondering, for innovation, seeing multiple campuses starting, working to get certain types of degrees, accreditation for engineering programs, things like that. What are the most innovative and sort of inspiring pieces of the college that you see happening right now?
Oh, now that is probably.
Or is it too hard? It's hard sometimes when we're in the inside.
hardest question, because I'm going to take liberty and wear my critical hat. Okay,
please do.
And so one of the things that the Ontario Colleges of Applied Arts and Technology Act did, so this is our new college charter, is there are different conversation pieces as to why it happened, but essentially, the Mike Harris government eliminated the Council of Regents, what we call the different agency groups. So the colleges were without a spot. And that was the motivation for changing that and the charter. But one of the things that the colleges presidents and through their advocacy agency, Cato, now called Colleges Ontario, they really advocated for some flexibility and some entrepreneurship. Now, at that time, so 20 years ago, I don't think anybody sort of foresaw the innovation, and I'll couple that innovation with the entrepreneurship component, because I think that's really how it plays out in the colleges. I don't think 20 years ago anybody foresaw that it would happen in quite the way that it has. So in 2002, the entrepreneurship was, well, let's have applied degree programs. Let's have a new set of programs that we can create not just more synergy and vibrancy, but also recognition of this sort of, the binary divide and the two-tier divide. And I think a lot of it was to do with sort of institutional prestige, plus also, bigger goals. Now, if we fast forward, I would say that particularly over the last 3 years, maybe at a stretch, well, certainly since the Ford government, let's put it into perspective. But the colleges, as tuition cuts came in and tuition freezes came in, it's always been a problem. Money has always been a problem. They took on the degree programs without any additional funding. And I know that some writers, I think so Michael Skolnick, for example, had commented that the funding was not on a par, the government funding was not on a par with colleges. But my own research, is documented. The colleges said, yes, we can do it for the same amount of money. And it's very, very difficult to deliver a degree program, particularly in a technical area, at the same level of funding as a diploma program. So there's been this massive, massive squeeze of money, and over the years with the tuition cuts and the tuition freezes, that's become much, much more difficult. And the colleges basically bridged that gap with part-time faculty, contract faculty, and cost cutting as best they can. Really, it's incredible that they managed to do it. I won't say that part-time faculty agreed with the way that they did it, because I think that's created some sort of differences within the faculty body, but they did manage to sustain themselves. But in recent years, what has happened is that act and allowing that entrepreneurship has really opened up the door to foster the international student market. So in terms of what's driving innovation, well, I printed off, and I'm going to quote you the actual number here, just for Conestoga for our last business plan. And give me 1 second. I should have shuffled my papers ahead of time.
I can actually we can edit. I can cut out the time gap,
okay.
and you can look like you have it instantly.
Okay. We had last year an operating surplus. And remember, we're supposed to be non-profit. We had an operating surplus of $119,678,678.
And that's from their annual report.
678 in the annual report, 2002, 2003, actual fiscal year results. Net surplus after capital related contributions amortization, net surplus for the fiscal year was over $102 million.
Well, the college is doing well.
The colleges are doing so well. We are buying buildings, and we are
expanding the campuses.
Expanding campuses. I have never seen such decor. The decor is wonderful. All of
the beautiful new buildings. I've driven past them in Waterloo. Yeah, they're gorgeous.
Yeah. All of the the delayed maintenance has either been put to rights or is in the process of doing so.
So are those industry,
never had so much money?
Like, is that entrepreneurial industry partnerships? Is that international student tuition, or combination of all of these things? Because one of the governance things we talk about in this course is that colleges can be managed like businesses in a way that universities just can't.
Yeah. 73% of operating revenue, per page 26 of the Conestoga's annual report, 73% of revenue came from student tuition and fees.
Okay. So that's our international student fees being in there. Absolutely.
International student fees. Now, in terms of program development, what we are doing is we are developing programs, and basically these are programs to attract more students.
Yeah.
And so we really have shifted, and I think that's maybe something that perhaps people aren't having as much of a conversation about that I would like, and that is that we have shifted from serving a domestic student body to serving an international student body, and our programs become basically is commodification. There's no other way that we can describe it. Now, is that good for domestic students? Well, I think, yes, there are some wins for domestic students because they've got accessible and affordable education. Is it a win for Ontarians and Canada? Absolutely. We're talking about money that is coming into the economy, and it's not that we don't need people. So I think in terms of an immigration strategy, that policy that the federal government has as an innovation strategy, I think it certainly for new Canadians having a credential which is made in Ontario or made in Canada, think certainly serves them a purpose as well. For many years we've had foreign trained professionals that have found it very difficult, or people with degrees from outside of the country found it very difficult to integrate. So that's a plus point. But we are looking at really the mandate of the colleges, and I know we've talked about different roles of education in that's part of that higher education framework. But what is the purpose of education? But I think we are at the point now where we can pretty much say that one of the newer roles of the colleges, even though it's not written into the objects, is that we have an immigration mandate. And,
absolutely.
But it's morphed itself. These divides get blurred, and by default, it's the policy entrepreneurs behind the scenes that sort of are doing that steering. But that's where we're at.
And I've heard a quite a strong criticism that we desperately need our skilled international migrants, but we are requiring them to pay tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to then enter low wage economy jobs. So yes, they get some training here, but we desperately need them. And the idea that we're asking them to pay for themselves is a legitimate critique. I think you've really spelled it out for us. It's been such a helpful conversation. I think you've raised the questions that I'd love for us to talk about in our tutorial. So Dr. Ann Charles will be there for our hour to talk to the groups and answer any questions that you have coming out of this. Questions like, when we're thinking of adding that human element to our degrees, these ideas of the degree out credits that they must take, things like, science and society, is that enough? Is that enough to sort of build the whole person into these programs? Because I think there's a lot of hope and interest there. Are we treating our international students in a way that's just when we're recruiting them? Do we have the supports to back up the people who are coming, who are transitioning into the workplace, who need support and care? Do we have enough supports going there? And what other questions should we encourage the students to ponder before they come to class in?
Actually, there's one other thing that I think people should look at really well, and that is quality and quality assurance. Now, there is a mismatch, and I don't know whether that was deliberate, but certainly this is something that is interesting. We have what we call key performance indicators.
Yes.
And part of the key performance indicators, it also looks at quality metrics such as graduation rate. So our latest business plan has an 81% graduation rate, but within the documents, and I'll give you the page number itself here. So within the annual report, page 27, there is a KPI performance report.
Yeah.
And in the KPI performance report, it gives an indication of post-graduation rates. Now, in 2017-18, we had a post-graduation rate at Conestoga of 72.8%, with by comparison, the whole of the Ontario college system, 66.8%. So we were doing pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we fast forward to the latest available data, the 22-23 numbers are not available, but again, you can look at the chart on this. Our post-secondary graduation rate had dropped to 68.2%.
Okay.
That is a massive, massive drop. It's all very well to have access to education, whether you're domestic or whether you are international, but if you don't graduate, my goodness, what about the human cost that is associated with that? So we're talking about debt, whether it be domestic student debt, whether it's international students and their families going into debt, trying to help and finance them. But if they don't even get the credential in the end, that to me is a massive, massive question.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this is one of the things I've heard from quite a few of my international students who would have come for an undergraduate in Canada, taking a degree that the subject wasn't necessarily fit for them. And they've actually taken this degree to begin to explore deeply the equity issues related to international student mobility. And so I want them to really dive into that for their papers. Bring your questions to Anne, and we will have a really good conversation about this when she comes to class. Any last thoughts, Anne, before we go? I have just loved this conversation with you. It's the highlight of my day.
Oh, no. In terms of last thoughts, there are so many things. You'd have me talking for another couple of hours.
This is why I love you. This is exactly what I need. No, we want this. This is what we want.
There is so much to talk about, but it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your invitation and to give my 2 cents worth on something that I love and feel very
absolutely.
About.
Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in class for a Zoom conversation. All right, bye for now.
That's great. Bye-bye.